Hello everyone. Welcome back to another Patreon Selects. It's that time of month again, so we have a kind of interesting one. So a segment that is pretty common on the Patreon newsletter, but not going to be so common in the Patreon Selects is Jeff Plays. So one of the games that I played outside of the show, usually both Tony and I will do one of these segments, pretty frequently. We don't plan on bringing too many of these over, but this one specifically, a few of the people who listen asked for this game, and that's why I played it. And that's why we're going to bring it to our Patreon Selects and our main feed. So hopefully you enjoy, and this is my take on Void Stranger. And hello everyone. Thank you for joining me on another segment where I go outside the Game Boy and talk about another game. This one actually has been recommended to me by a few people who listen to the show, so kind of excited to get into this one. And it was much deeper, I think, than I had originally expected. But today we're going to be talking about Void Stranger. So before we start with anything, I do want to say I will be breaking this up a little bit differently than normal. I will try to keep the main mechanics and aesthetics discussion spoiler free as much as I can. And then at the end, I will add a spoiler section. So if you're interested in playing this game or anything like that, and you haven't already, or if you're in the middle of it and you just don't want to be spoiled, I will, again, try to put all of those spoilers at the end, and I'll give you plenty of warning so you can skip to the next section or whatever, so you're not getting spoiled. So just a little heads up on that. I do think that this game is probably one of the hardest games for me to give an immediate opinion on. It is one of those games that I think is very polarizing. I think to some people, this is probably going to be hands down one of their favorite games ever. And I think, honestly, that's part of the reason why the people who recommended it to me did have such enthusiasm for it. But I could also see it very much so being a game that kind of rubs people the wrong way or makes people kind of bounce off of it. So again, we'll kind of get into that. I'll try to do my best to explain that without giving spoilers. But again, we'll get into that. So Void Stranger was released in September of 2023, so relatively new, developed by System Erasure, same people who made Zero Ranger, so the shoot 'em up style game. What they have to say about it? Void Stranger is a 2D Sokoban style puzzle game where every step counts. Descend into the forgotten labyrinth teeming with fiendish foes and traps that defy reason. A swift defeat lurks at every corner for those who neither study their surroundings nor think their moves through with care. Trust your wits and slowly, surely, you will conquer the mysteries before you. I'm not so sure that I would conquer all these mysteries, but, that's a good intro into kind of what it is without getting too deep into it from System Erasure's point. As far as mechanics, it is a Sokoban style. So, Boxel is in the Sokoban series, so we've already covered a game like that. The goal is to beat each puzzle level and to go further down or deeper into the labyrinth, as they called it, or the tower, whatever you want to call it. But more or less, that is the overarching goal, is to beat each level going further and further into the labyrinth. Controls are relatively simple. D-pad moves you around. A will magic the block, so essentially you can pick up blocks around you, and it also interacts with things. A little bit different than Boxel and other Sokobans in that series where you're actually pushing boxes around. In this game, you can actually kind of pick up the different floor tiles and move them and rearrange them in order to beat the level. I also kind of find it funny, if you hold the select button, it'll say end it all with a little time bar that fills up. And if you let it fill up, it just closes the game. I just kind of find that funny. Very easy way to close the game and just kind of nice. So I said the Sokoban puzzles were the top level. This is really a puzzle game inside of a puzzle game. So You're playing the Sokoban puzzles to kind of uncover a deeper puzzle and uncover a deeper story. I'm jumping out the gate with that because I really don't think that that is a big spoiler. I think if you've played any sort of game like this or any sort of story game, you get that impression very quickly. So within the first minute of playing, you'll realize that there is no way to go back. There's no way to reset your game. There's no way to load a save state, etc. And I think, yeah, if you've played any story game where that sort of mechanic is there, you realize very, very quickly that there's going to be more to it, and there's going to be a little bit of an interesting gameplay aspect because of that. Another very clear thing about that, this only has a single achievement in Steam. As soon as you load up the game, it will give you your one and only achievement, so you 100% the game. And I think that is very indicative that the devs knew that they didn't want to spoil the broader story, the broader gameplay. So they didn't want to give a bunch of achievements that kind of spoil it if you look over the achievement list. So while it is a Sokoban style game, and that is kind of what you're doing, it is, there's more to it, and it does become very evident very quickly that there are going to be things that are missable. There are going to be things that affect how the game plays out that you might not be able to go back to, or the decision you make in this run is going to matter and affect those things. Again, I don't really consider that a spoiler because it becomes very evident, in my opinion, and you feel it very quickly, or at least I very quickly started to feel that kind of dread or the FOMO of, oh no, if I do something wrong, then I'm stuck with that. And I think that can add a fun gameplay, especially to Sokoban, which you wouldn't necessarily tie to that sort of feeling. I do like how a lot of the basic mechanics are introduced in the game. As you go further into the labyrinth, you will have various enemies and things like that. And I think when they first introduce them to you, they do a very good job. So the first enemy that you see within the first, 10 levels or something like that, it's in its own separate place. It cannot come into contact with you, but you can kind of see how it moves and all the things like that. And I think that is a good way to introduce that. As you go further and further into the game, it starts taking away those barriers, and it becomes more of a learning in the moment. But in the beginning, they do kind of show you slowly, and I think it really makes the game a lot more approachable. The last thing I'll say about the mechanics, again, trying to not spoil too much, is this game really forces and expects you to experiment. Experiment with different things, experiment with how you handle different situations, different puzzles, all of those things. But it can also be quite punishing if the experiment goes wrong. I think that's shown by lack of restarts, kind of all of the things I've said. And I think that gameplay of expecting you to experiment is nice. It gives you kind of the opportunity to do all of that. But then, yeah, it can be a little punishing and sometimes can be a little frustrating, we will say. Again, I'll get deeper into that in the spoiler section if you're interested, but that's more or less what I have for the mechanics for now. As far as the creative discussion, this game is immaculate. It is so good in the aesthetics. The sprites are adorable. They're so good. The cutscenes are amazing. The graphics, everything is really well done. It switches back and forth between a little bit more realistic pixel art for the cutscenes, and then, kind of your typical what you would expect on a Game Boy retro game when you're actually playing the game. And it's so good. I think they nailed the visuals. The music, fantastic. The music is really good. Honestly, it has no right to go as hard as it does, but it's constantly just impressive and fun to listen to and nice as you're going through the game. I will say when I first started it up, maybe I should have turned it down a little bit, not because of the music, but the first couple of sound effects kind of gave me a little bit of a jump scare. So I don't know if that was my own doing or if maybe there was a little bit of mixing that was off with that. But once I got it all kind of fixed on my end, I think music was great. All the sound effects are great. Just, yeah, the aesthetics were just fantastic. The animations of you walking around, of you picking up the blocks. I cannot say enough good about this part of the creative discussion. I'm not going to talk about the story in this section because that'll be in the following section, because that is, again, I think very spoiler heavy. But even there, it is phenomenal, the kind of the depth and the effort you can tell that they put into everything. The one minor gripe that I do have, and this is just me and also because my computer setup is a little weird, I could not figure out a way to full screen on my second monitor. Typically, my second monitor is the one that I'm looking at. It's the big one in front of me. Don't ask me why I set it up that way. That's just how it's set up. But I could not find a way to full screen on the second monitor. And that was a little bit frustrating. So I either had to play on my first monitor, which is off to the side, or I had to play in a windowed version that was not full screen. Again, not a big deal. Tied to my setup. So if your setup is more normal, not an issue. That was just the one little gripe that I did have. Wrapping back to my immediate opinion before we get into the spoilers, do I think someone should play this game? I think the main attraction of this game is the story. That's actually one of the reasons why someone recommended it to me, is because I have said before how I think puzzle games don't necessarily need a story. To me, this is a story game that uses the puzzles to facilitate the story, whereas Boxel and games like that, it's a puzzle game that they're trying to jam a story into. And to me, that's the big differences with these. Because of that, yeah, I think the story adds to the game. I think if you are interested in kind of uncovering the story, using a Sokoban style game to do that, and uncovering a lot of secrets, then this is a game that I think you would really enjoy. Honestly, a lot of times I play games, I'm pretty brain dead and I'm kind of going through the motions, I'm playing, etc. I'm not necessarily accounting for everything, remembering everything. So sometimes these types of games can be difficult for me. If you're the same way, how this game might be difficult and might be something to stay away from, because it can get very frustrating and very in-depth in that aspect. But again, that's kind of what I was saying at the beginning. I think it is such a polarizing game. I think some people, this will be one of the best games that they've ever played, and I think it'll just frustrate some other people. I know that's a little bit on the fence of a way to answer if someone should play it. But again, I think it is very polarizing, and I think it's really a person could love it or hate it, and that's all there is to it. So with that, I am about to start talking about spoilers. So if you want to avoid that, again, if you're in the middle of the game or you're thinking about playing the game and don't want to be spoiled, skip ahead to the next section. Avoid this section. Avoid spoilers, spoiler alert, all of that fun stuff. I think it really wouldn't do this game justice to not talk about spoilers at all. So after just this very quick silence, I'm going to start talking about spoilers. So this is your last chance to skip ahead. All right, I'm obviously not going to get into every secret here, and this is by no means a guide or potentially won't even help you if you're playing through the game. Partially because there's way too much to get into, partially because I don't know if I could even remotely have a guide and all of that. I have not gotten through all of the different endings. Just a quick overview of what this game actually is. It's a story game, and you are going through playing as this character, Gray, and you are trying to save the princess, and you're going through this loop, and you can find different rooms. You can do all these different things to manipulate how the story turns out. And then once you've done that, you can come back and play as another character, Lily, not the Princess Lily, Princess Lily's daughter for story reasons, and play through it again, and then you'll play as one of the Void Lords, and then you go through and play again to get to Dis, the end, which is like the true ending. So you're going through kind of the same game multiple times to find new things, to interact with NPCs or characters differently, to change the ending or to get a new piece of information, or I guess building this knowledge in order to get to an ending or get to a spot or do the things you need to do to beat the game in a different way. So that's kind of like really what the game is about. It's not really about the Sokoban. The Sokoban is just a way to facilitate that. It's really about kind of figuring out all those deeper secrets and things like that. I haven't gone through all those. I've tried to read multiple guides, watched multiple people play through different endings, all of that stuff. I've put hours and hours into it, so I do, have experience, but I definitely have not done all of the endings, just, I guess, full transparency there. That really wraps back around to kind of what I was saying, that it forces and expects you to experiment, but then it'll punish that behavior by making you replay potentially hours of game to get back to where you were in order to not kill the NPC or talk to the big head Gore with the sword or without the sword, or, whatever you're doing. I did see one review that said something along the lines of, this is a game that expects you to know all of the mechanics without explaining them and punishes you when you don't know them. And I think that's quite apt and very similar to my own experience and the notes I had taken prior to seeing that. I think the first time I really realized that, oh no, this is going to be one of those games was in B027. That's the first time I encountered an NPC. I saw there was a snake. They're not a snake. I think they're a leech. And I thought in my head, oh, I bet if I don't do anything and I just move, the leech is going to push that person off. I could tell that there was a way to save them. I don't know why I decided to let the leech push them off first as opposed to trying to save them first. But I was like, okay, yeah, I'll test this theory and then I'll just restart the level and go talk to them. Yeah, it turns out when I restarted level, they were not there. Yeah, that's when I realized, shoot, this is a game where all of those little things are going to really matter and really affect how the game plays out. As far as my first gameplay, I got voided almost immediately. So you can find locusts in chests, and when you find them, they essentially act as extra lives. If you fall off into the void or if you get hit by an enemy, it'll use a locust and you can then revive, continue playing. If you do not have any locusts and you die, you will be prompted to eat a fruit by this little, fairy thing, which, spoilers, is not a fun little fairy thing. It is actually Lev in disguise, but they'll prompt you to eat a fruit. You then eat the fruit and then you become voided and you play through the game as normal, but you can't die. If you fall off, you essentially have infinite retries. I got voided almost immediately. I picked up the rod, walked around. I guess I didn't try to pick up blocks with it and then just walked off the side because I was interested in what happened. And yeah, got voided almost immediately. One of my big takeaways from this, or playing this game, is there is so much here. There are, I think, 224, 225 in the first go through, and then 254 levels in other go-throughs. And all of that is kind of fluid because you can skip levels, you can replay levels, you can go back, you can do a lot of things. So those numbers are questionable. You can find bonus levels, all that fun stuff. But you essentially have to kind of go through all of that to play through a run. And then if you mess up in the run, there are a few ways that you can reset, but it's not very clear unless you've looked up guides and things like that. And then it's also not readily available all the time. You have to find certain rooms and certain circumstances to be able to reset. It feels like there's just too much to me, in honesty. It feels like they could have reduced the number of levels and made the run-throughs a little bit quicker. Maybe made it just that bit less punishing if you do mess up, but maybe that's what they wanted. They wanted it to kind of be grandiose and really feel like it matters. So I could see kind of both ways on that. So I find it kind of funny. In the first time I played through the game, there's a level B167 where you have to talk to the mimic in order to beat the level. And that's the first time this mechanic had been brought up. And the mimic is just a type of enemy that mimics your movement. You could talk to them in the other levels, but in this level, yeah, you had to talk to them to be able to beat it. And then they just exploded. And I made a note about why, like, how would you figure that out? What would prompt you to do that? I did by happenstance figure it out. But yeah, that was the first time where I was like, why would anyone do this? Why would you figure that out? After playing more and watching other people play and reading guides, oh, sweet summer child, that is not even the beginning of it. There are just so many things that are missable or things that you need to do to be able to kind of progress the game. So one of the big ones is you find brands throughout the game. They're on, wall statues, they're different things like in murals and things like that. One of the mechanics is there are certain rooms where you make those brands in the room, and then when you fall into the void, you go into a secret room. This is how you get the 3 items that are needed to really beat the game. They're called burdens. It is the void memory, the void wings, and the void sword. To be able to, really get through the game and get to the rest of the endings, you need to do these. And to get these, you need to have the brands that you put in certain levels that then allow you to do that. Also, they just make the game easier to play. The first one is in B023. So after my first playthrough, I kind of went back and I was like, okay, yeah, I'll play through non-voided now. It tells you, remember this brand 100 different times. I get to B023 and the room is set up essentially identical. You just have to remove one block and then it'll match the brand. And I just completely missed it. I went past it. My image recognition brain did not remotely even start to think about it. I just picked up the crystal that was in the corner and moved on with life. It wasn't until later when I was looking at guides and things like that I realized, like, oh, this is what I need to do. And that is probably the easiest of the secrets to get to. At certain points, there are kind of like little wisps coming up from the void. That's a little bit on the nose, I think relatively easy. Like, okay, follow that. At one point, there is just kind of invisible footprints that when you move, you can see them light up and you have to follow them into the void. 100% would have missed those if I did not know about them. And then to be able to do certain things or just kind of help yourself out, you can manipulate the UI. I found this extremely interesting and really cool when I found out about it. But yeah, in certain levels, specifically the birch levels, you can build across to the UI at the bottom that shows your health, the number of locusts you have, what room you're on, and you can switch the tiles around. And so you can, if you're on level 98 and you have 1 locust left, you can give yourself 98 locusts by, switching those tiles. Or you can go back to level 1 by putting, your 1 where the level is supposed to be. So very cool. There is a secret room, B000, that you can only get to by doing this. And it just, again, the amount of effort and thought and, everything that goes into that, the devs really, really, really thought about how to put all of this stuff in, how to hide these things, how to make them interesting. And I will say, while a lot of them, I cannot imagine how anyone found out about it or decided to do that or organically came across those things. But there are a decent number of hints and things like that NPCs do tell you and do kind of push you towards. So I'm not going to say it's completely out of left field and absurd for anyone to figure those things out. But yeah, looking at all of them combined, it's one of those things that just breaks my brain as to how you would figure those things out and how you would actually kind of get to the true ending and get all of these things without guides or help. With that, I don't have a whole lot to say in a broader sense. There are kind of a few little things that I do want to point out, though. I love that the music changes with each domain. I just think that's a very good touch, and each Void Lord has its own domain, kind of based off of, I guess, Dante's Inferno. But yeah, they each have their own domain. Each 28 level segment, is a different domain. And they change the enemies, they change the music. I just think it's very, very good. I really like the introduction of other genres into it as minigames. One of the first ones you come across is kind of like this boss RPG fight against Princess Lily as Gray. And then there's a rhythm game when Gray is teaching Princess Lily how to dance. And then, at the end, there's a shoot 'em up section that is, I guess, reminiscent of Zero Ranger. So I love that. I thought that was a great little touch and kind of gave you a reason to pay attention or care about the cutscenes a little bit. I literally laughed out loud when I got to the first birch tree and it asked if I wanted to rest, and I hit yes, and it just closed the game. I thought that was hilarious. A little annoying every time doing that, but I thought that was just very, very funny. The first ending that I think a lot of people will get, the void ending, where you get to level 224, 225, and it starts playing the song and will then just kind of start teleporting you all over the place. One, song, fantastic. But then how it's doing it and how it's kind of going in and out of different levels, how the levels start to kind of degrade, all of that, I think the entire time I was just watching kind of like, what is happening? It just feels kind of epic, and it makes you feel like there's more happening. And it was the first time that I was really like, something is going on. Like, what is this? This is awesome. And again, I think that's probably the first quote unquote ending. It's not credits per se, but the first ending that most people will get, and it's pure cinema. Also, in Sif's run, when he rescues B and B starts crying and they're on the beach, Sif just pulls out a little umbrella and is holding it, and the little sprites are just so good. I saw that and it was adorable. I loved it. It was great. So I think that is more or less all that I want to say about Void Stranger. Obviously, there was a lot of things that I did not get into. I didn't really get into much of the story or all of the secrets. There's heaps more to get into, and I find it very, very interesting. So hopefully some of what I said made sense and you were able to kind of follow along with everything. And yeah, let me know if there's more that I got wrong, more you would have liked to hear, or anything like that. But again, thank you for listening to me talk about Void Stranger.